You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
And we've got our next friend coming on, and this is a friend, actually. Travis Korson is joining us. Travis, please introduce your new organization.
Sure. So I'm with the Frontiers of Freedom Institute, which was founded by Senator Malcolm Wallop of Washington State. He was the founder of the Senate Steering Committee, and he believed in limited government, a strong national defense, and traditional values. So that's the organization's values enshrine. The organization's actually been around since his retirement from the Senate in the mid-'90s, and we've been out there promoting a number of free market and limited government issues, including the one that I'll be talking with you guys tonight about.
Okay. Now, free markets and fisheries management. What is this about?
So the current system of fisheries management just isn't cutting it. Right now, the NOAA says what size your boat can be, what size engine you can use, what days you can fish. It puts all these really arbitrary restrictions on your boat that basically put the government on the boat. What we're looking to advocate is something called catch shares. And what it does is it assigns property rights to fisheries. So instead of the government managing the boats and saying what days you can fish, it gives the fishermen a personal stake in the fisheries. It gives them a certain amount of fish that they can catch every year, and as a certain percentage of the fishery, and as those fisheries' health increase, they get to bring in more fish. So it eliminates the tragedy of the commons that really has governed fisheries to date.
No, it's pretty interesting. We've seen in recent news cycles, particularly up in Massachusetts area and in New England, they're hurting already. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, just move up there and pay the taxes, pay the cost of living. It's not easy to make a living as a fisherman, and so when you have a government that's literally telling you you can't fish here, but you can't work on this day, and you can only catch so many pounds, and so you're already limited to how much you can make anyway. But then, something goes wrong.
Exactly. Well, the current system just is anti-fishermen. Fishermen have one of the most dangerous occupations in the world. If you look at the U.S. statistics on workers from 2000 to 2010, there were 124 deaths per 100,000 workers with fishermen, as compared with a national average of 4 deaths per 100,000 workers among all U.S. workers. Wow. So it's 31 times more dangerous than the average job. On top of that, the work under the current system is unsteady depending on, kind of what the days are. So this system really allows them to go out when it's safe, and puts a lot of, power back in the fishermen's hands.
No, it's interesting. Do we have issues with foreign nations coming in and fishing in these areas that we're discussing?
So one of the biggest issues about the current system are the migratory species. And, you can shut down certain fisheries, but because these fish migrate, you go to a certain distance, and you've got other countries, other governments that are looking to catch these fish as well. Other countries actually have pioneered this. In New Zealand, actually, where they pioneered this, they've doubled the worth of their fisheries over the past 30 years by instituting the catch share system from, I forget the numbers, but I believe it's somewhere from about $450 million to about $950 million.
And they're not having overfishing issues.
Exactly. The fisheries have actually recovered. Science Magazine published an article where they said that when they started instituting fishery management, if they had instituted catch shares back in the 70s when the first tranche was instituted, 70% of the world's fisheries would not be overfished today, and we would have had an additional $50 billion in revenues from fisheries if we had managed them this way.
You bring up a very interesting point, which I never really thought of. You think of the zone, but clearly many of these things are migratory species. Mm-hmm. And much like, a scary thing if you're Israel would be water coming down from Lebanon, mm-hmm. right? Or air coming in from another part of the world. And I guess you have the same issue with the fisheries.
Certainly.
Are you finding any organizations that are recognizing similar issues? In other words, is there any cooperation with other countries, certainly countries that we border?
Sure. Like I said, New Zealand's a perfect example. They were really the pioneers on this. The European Union, they're kind of grappling with the issue of how to manage the fisheries. And there are a few other countries that are looking to institute this, but it's certainly something that's on the cutting edge. Catch shares actually didn't start in this country till 2006, when the Bush administration instituted them, and now 65% of our country's fisheries are actually under catch shares management, and we're looking to make that 100%. Magnuson-Stevens is actually up for reauthorization this year, which is the fisheries management bill, and we spend an average of $80 million on subsidies, fuel subsidies and other subsidies for these non-catch shares fisheries. So what we really want to do is take that $80 million out, make it safer for fishermen, get government out of the way, and really get back to bringing more fish in for the consumer.
And I assume there's some consideration for monitoring populations and not just an overall population, but I would assume things like age. They must age trend fish, right? Do we have more younger fish?
Correct. So the NOAA sets the overall cap for the fishery. And what happens is basically every fisherman gets a certain percentage of the fishery. So based off of your historical fish that you bring in and everything else, that's how they assign the shares initially. The thought is that because the fishermen have a stake in the fishery, they're going to make sure they don't overfish. They're going to exercise good practices. They're not going to do things that will damage it otherwise. And as the health of the fishery increases, they basically get a higher share of fish. They get to bring in more fish every year, and they make more money. So it really is a free market. They have a stake in there, and it's really a free market incentive to be a part of it and really be a good stakeholder in it.
So who's the antagonist in this equation?
It's something that the conservative movement is split on. There are some folks that believe it's nothing more than cap and trade for fisheries. And there are a number of reasons why that's not the case. The biggest that comes to mind is the fact that there's no demand for carbon outside of a government mandate. While fish is something that's been traded and something that's been out there before this country was founded, before there really was organized government. So this is taking the idea of having a free exchange and assigning those property rights, and it's really different from the cap and trade argument in a lot of ways.
And is there control over sort of the empowerment? In other words, do the small fishermen have as much rights or as much capability as in this equation as do, say, large corporate tax
Of course,
fishing?
and actually it's better for the small fishermen because they're not forced to go out on certain days. It gives them the flexibility to do things with their family if they need to stay in when it's bad weather, to do things like that. And it really also lowers the barriers to entry because the way that the current system is set up, there are some fisheries that have fishing days, fishing times that it's less than 20 days a year. So unless you have a really big boat with the big equipment and things like that, you're not able to get the fish up in time. So what this does is this allows the small fishermen to come in, buy a small share, fish it, especially the line and hook fishermen instead of the trawlers, which have the big boats, and allows them to really come in and be a small owner in this.
This whole thing's very interesting to me because I only like to eat fish that come from
it's a Friday,
places.
so all your Catholic listeners, I'm sure they wouldn't know what to do without their fish on their Lenten Friday. So,
no, I want to have fish that come off a boat.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived near the shore most of my life, almost my entire life,
mm-hmm.
and I'm used to eating something that's fresh and I feel safe with.
Sure.
And I'm always concerned. You go to a lot of stores today, and there's all types of things, fish and seafood products coming from places that I don't want any food from. Do I have to name the place?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm concerned about fish farms and things of that nature. But one thing that I've noticed, I go into the grocery store, and some places, I kid you not, it's $20 to $30 a pound for fish
mm-hmm.
that I used to pay maybe $5 a pound for just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. One of the biggest advantages of catch shares is that because you have the flexibility to fish year-round as opposed to a very small fishing season, it gives you a steady price year-round. There have actually been a number of celebrity chefs that have come out in favor of catch shares and a number of small business owners because the market price can vary so wildly that they want a steady supply of fresh fish. In the current system, you've got a 20-day fishing season. Some of these fisheries, these fish are frozen for months and months on end, and then thawed out to basically be used. And you're looking for them elsewhere, and the price spikes. So what this does is this ensures a steady supply at a known price and a known quantity. So it really helps out the small business owners as well in this.
it seems to me you have a wide range of people who would be interested in this change. From not just conservatives, not just liberals, not, I mean, a lot of people with different thoughts, and it's not really a political issue. I mean, of course, it's being decided by the politicos, but it's not a political issue. It's a matter of economics and really common sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's basically there are really 4 things about TET shares that if I want to leave your listeners with about why it's a conservative approach, this is what it'd be. It utilizes market forces to allocate resources and encourages conservation via personal responsibility. It operates under federalism and localism as governing principles because it's the regional fisheries management councils that are really looking at this, as opposed to bureaucrats in Washington.
That's very important.
It embraces resource usage rather than locked-out preservation by just closing some fisheries, which you've seen them do as they become depleted, overfished. And lastly, as I was speaking earlier, it saves federal monies because this isn't top-down, it's not command and control, and you don't have to subsidize these boats anymore because they can only fish for a few days every year.
And here on the Final Say Radio Show, we do not like subsidies.
Frontiers of Freedom are not fans of it either, so the less government we can have, the better.
Travis Korson, please share your website for us.
It's fishingandfreedom.com. Once more, fishingandfreedom.com.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with the new organization. Thanks. Travis Korson again.